That kind of feeds into the third question we've got from, again, Instagram at Banning Ballard. His question is, last year's Open moved away from 1RM lifts and shifted more toward raw aerobic capacity. Do you see that trend holding for 2017?
I do see it continuing. Yeah. I don't think they, and this is me guessing, it's I don't know this, but I don't think that the 1RM test inside of the 5 open tests, that year they had 6 because it was 1A and 1B with the 1 max clean and jerk after that first toe to bar deadlift AMRAP. I don't believe that dictated the results they were looking for. I think it weighed too heavily towards the strength athletes.
You mean that the athletes who got through weren't
correct?
The athletes they
it had too much emphasis on the outcome of the results,
yep.
where you're weighing essentially a little less than 20% of the overall scoring based off of that one lift.
Yep.
I just don't think that that's what they're looking for. I don't think it tests enough things for them. Mm-hmm. Secondly, there's so many ties. And they don't love ties.
Yep.
When I say them, I'm talking about CrossFit headquarters, Dave Castro, whoever you want to say them is. So I think that the better test is what they had last year. I thought last year was one of the better opens in terms of what they were testing. Mm-hmm. Logistically, it was a little bit of a nightmare for the affiliates. But in terms of the overall test, I was a big fan of it.
Do you think that, not to interrupt, but do you think that do you think that over the course of the Open, they've been trying to refine the athlete, the athlete, or the idea of the athlete who gets through it? Or do you think every year they're trying to test for something else or test to get another kind of athlete through? Or is this like a small like iteration or an evolution every year? Like they're getting closer to what they think is the right answer, is like the whatever it is.
I think that they have a picture of who they want to get through.
Okay.
I do.
But that doesn't change every year. That's not like this year we want
correct.
Whatever.
Yeah, we don't want the big athletes this year and then the gymnastic athletes this year.
Yeah.
I think they have an idea of who they want to get through, and those are the fittest.
Right.
And they're trying to test for the fittest. Now, what they're not testing for is the fittest. Mm-hmm. There's huge limitations to the Open, and it's very obvious if you've looked at it for a little bit. They can't test for the world's fittest during the Open. Mm-hmm. It's a reason that Matt Fraser and Katrin Davidar didn't win last year. They're the world's fittest, but they didn't win the Open. Mm-hmm. What they're truly testing for in the Open, and this is a big thing that I think is missed, is generally it's work capacity. Mm-hmm. It's who can do the most work in those time domains, right? And it's an incredible test for that, but it's not super high skill. Mm-hmm. There's no odd objects. There's no horizontal displacement, meaning farmers carries, sled pushes, things like that. They can't do rope climbs. They haven't, there's a whole host of parameters that they've self-imposed themselves into that they can't test for.
Yep.
So when we're training for the Open, if you're an athlete, or I should say to the community that we're talking to, if you're an athlete that's looking to get through the Open or to excel in the Open, find out what they're testing, and it's not as unknown and unknowable as we think it is. Historical data shows us there's about 15 movements that they're testing. Mm-hmm. That's not a lot.
Right.
It's 5 more than decathlon. Decathlon just it's an event. Mm-hmm. We can figure this out. In terms of pull-ups, there's only been 1. It's chest to bar pull-ups. Mm-hmm. In terms of handstand push-ups, there's only been 1. It's kipping handstand push-ups. Mm-hmm. In terms of barbell, there's only about 5 different barbell movements that they're doing. There's not this huge, vast array of things that they're doing. Now, my guess is every year they throw in 1 or 2 new ones. It's always been 1, and last year there was 2.
Yep.
Year before, a couple years ago, it was rowing. Last year, it was the overhead walking lunge and the bar muscle-ups. My suggestion is don't get caught up in guessing what the next movement's going to be. Just try to get really fit at those 15. Mm-hmm. Let your fitness carry over to the others, because it will. Mm-hmm. And then you'll be able to excel at the ones that do come up. There's also known ones that we know are not going to come up, right? Every year I say this and they end up showing up. But I don't think we're going to see, athletes that are working their tail off to try to get to regionals, but have never been there, spend an enormous amount of time doing rope climbs. Mm-hmm. It's not one of the repertoires. Now, maybe they give it to us and they maybe give it to us with a 10-foot rope climb, but I think it's hard for them to standardize the other stuff, right? People that do D-ball stuff and prowler pushes, great tests of fitness, great developers of fitness, but it's not where we're being tested in. What we want is it's a strength and conditioning principle. It's like one of the things that should not be broken is the SAID principle, specific adaptation to impose demands. Train what you're going to be tested in. You know, if we know that we're going to be tested in a 800-meter swim, it doesn't make sense to do a whole bunch of surfing. Like, go swim.
Right.
It's probably
So
800
then,
meters.
If I'm serious about the Open and I think I've got a shot at regionals, do I just not do rope climbs for January and February? How do you balance? Because at some point you're training specifically for the Open.
Yep.
Is that good? Is that right? Is there
Depends
like a 80-20 sort of analysis you've got to do?
Yep, it's 80-20. It depends. So an example of that. I'll try and take 3 examples to show that. When I'm working with Katrin, we don't train for the Open at all. It's not even on our radar.
Yep.
We don't even really train for the regionals. You know, maybe that's overconfidence on our part. We train for the games. We train for the tests that we're going to see at the games year round.
Yep.
Knowing we don't need to peak out for the regionals or the Opens because we don't need to win those. We certainly need to be fit enough to pass through, but Ben Smith, when he was fittest on earth, didn't win his region. No one remembers that. It doesn't matter what place you come in your region. It's a pass fail thing. Yep. It's not first, second, third, fourth. It's the same thing for the Open for athletes that are trying to get through the Open to the regionals. If you feel confident you can make it through, then yeah, let's start dabbling into the next test, which will be rope climbs and the other stuff. Like ski ergs and bikes and the other stuff. But if you're not confident you're going to make it through, you can use the other stuff as that kind of auxiliary, work, as accessory type stuff that you think might have some transference or working weaknesses. There's a lot to be said for holds and carries and working your midline. We're not going to be tested on midline and holds, but they can have a big carryover to your fitness. If you're doing it because you believe it'll be a carry over to your fitness, that's a terrific approach. If you believe that you're doing it because you want to get the third wave adaptation, which means that you're trying to get very good at that movement, I think you're wasting your time. Trying to get really good at the nuancy parts of zip lining down, hands free down a rope. That's not going to get you fitter at the Open. That's going to get you fitter at ropes.